one day somebody does something unspeakable to someone else, to someone you hardly knew, and you do something about it, because you can.
This story comes to us from the Denver Post. Listen to this one. Denver police officers conducted an unconstitutional traffic stop last year when they claimed a driver rolled through stop signs even though there were no stop signs along his route, a federal judge found. The officers Emmett Hurd and Matthew Mullen also cited broken taillights as a reason for the stop, during which they discovered an illegal gun. But the driver's BMW did have one working taillight, which is all that's required under state law in Colorado. The officers did not have a legitimate reason to pull the driver over, U.S. District Court for the District of Colorado Judge Nina Wang found. That was in a January ruling. Judge Wang threw out all evidence connected to the traffic stop, including the gun that officers found under a seat during a protective sweep of the vehicle, which forced federal prosecutors to dismiss the entire criminal case against the driver, Azante Forrest. Now, he had faced a charge of illegally possessing a firearm. They write, to the extent the officers mistakenly suspected that Mr. Forrest failed to properly stop at a stop sign, such a mistake of fact is unreasonable, said the judge in January. She wrote, as Mr. Forrest succinctly puts it, no objectively reasonable and credible law enforcement officer would have believed that Mr. Forrest failed to stop at stop signs that do not exist. Forrest sued the two officers this last Monday for unlawful search and seizure. The Denver Police Department stopped a young African-American man driving a nice car while black. That was David Lane of Colorado, that's Forrest's attorney. Said they couldn't even come up with a good pretext for stopping him. And you know law enforcement is all about accountability. Now it is time for these officers to be held accountable for violating your constitutional rights. The officers spotted Forrest as he drove on Colfax Avenue, May 13th of 2025. The police officers pulled a U-turn to follow Forrest after the officers noticed two of his taillights were emitting white light, not red as required by law, but one was working, they said. Forrest then made a series of turns that the officers described as quick and sudden, according to the officers, and they believed were an attempt to evade them, although they had not yet turned on their lights or siren to stop him, according to Wang's ruling. Forrest then pulled over and stopped, and the officers suspected he did so in order to hide a weapon. The officers turned on their lights and siren and conducted the traffic stop. Hurd told Forrest that the reason for the stop was that he was not coming to complete stops at stop signs, and because his brake lights were showing white light, not red. But remember, there were no stop signs on his route. The officers apparently did not realize that the sole still working red brake light on Forrest's BMW meant he was fully in compliance with traffic regulations, Wang wrote. Well, a lot of cops don't even know the law. They're just dumbasses out there driving around. During the traffic stop, the officers discovered that Forrest was wanted on a shoplifting charge and was driving on a license that had been suspended for failing to pay child support. The officers opted not to arrest Forrest, but decided he could return to his vehicle only after they conducted a protective sweep to be sure there were no weapons inside, according to Wang's order. This is the judge. Forrest asked that someone pick him up instead, but the officers refused, instead insisting they needed to check his BMW for weapons. Always say no. No, you don't have consent. Always say that. The officers found a gun under Forrest's driver's seat. As a convicted felon, Forrest was prohibited from having a gun, and officers arrested him. He was later indicted on a federal charge of illegally possessing a firearm, absent reasonable suspicion that Mr. Forrest violated a traffic or equipment regulation, that officers violated Mr. Forrest's Fourth Amendment rights by initiating a traffic stop unconstitutionally. That was according to the judge. Both officers remain at the Denver Police Department, of course. State certification records show, and neither has been disciplined, of course not. Spokesman for the Denver Police Department declined to comment on the case this last Tuesday. State records show no credibility reports for the officer's professional certifications through the Peace Officer Standards and Training Board. Since 2019, state law has required enforcement agencies that employ post-certificate holders to notify the board if a certificate holder knowingly made an untruthful statement in a criminal justice record, among other circumstances. Post is then required to begin a process to revoke the officer's certification. Now, Judge Wang noted in her ruling that the officers did not mention stop signs in their written reports as a basis for the traffic stop. Really? And instead included only the BMW's taillights and Forrest's evasive driving. The credibility of Officer Hurd's verbal statement to Mr. Forrest about the stop sign violations is substantially undermined by the fact that the officers elected not to address stop signs in their reports as a basis for the traffic stop, Judge Wang wrote. Federal prosecutors later focused their legal arguments on the alleged stop sign violations and careless driving, while minimizing the brake lights as a reason for the stop, apparently conceding that the two broken taillights were not a violation of the law, the court records show. The Denver Police Department in 2024 prohibited officers from pulling drivers over for minor traffic infractions like broken taillights, unless the officer also had a second reason for the stop, like suspecting the driver is connected to a more serious crime or as a response to a specific ongoing crime trend. It was not immediately clear this last Tuesday whether the officers acted within that policy during Forrest's traffic stop, though court records note that the officers knew the area around Colfax Avenue to be a high crime area. David Lane, the attorney for this guy, noted that Forrest has been pulled over multiple additional times since the May 2025 stop. He has been stopped a couple of times since then for nothing, said Lane. I think Denver is patrolling Colfax looking for young black men driving nice cars, said this attorney. I believe it. But here's the thing, and I'm done here, but I want to add this because I want to hear your comments on this. Two cops pull a guy over and they tell him, yeah, we're pulling you over because you ain't stopping at stop signs. And there's no stop signs anywhere in the area. Then they don't mention that in their police reports. Of course not. I'm going to get to something in a second. Give me a minute here. And then they're not even disciplined according to court records, or the news looked into it and said they were never even disciplined. They just, good job, boys. Yeah, stop those black men driving those nice cars. What? Are you kidding me? They're not even disciplined, as far as we know. They should be fired, in my humble opinion. But, and this is the last statement, it reminds me when I was out cop watching here in my city, Deputy Michael Rose had pulled over a guy. I started recording, and his wife got a little upset, and he goes, no, it's fine, hon. I go, no, here's what I want to ask you. He pulled you over, and the guy said, yeah, he pulled me over because he said my license plate was expired. Now, this was in I think, February or March of 2022, I think. I'm just going to guess. I don't remember the exact, but I remember May, I think, was the tag. Anyway, so he says his registration was expired. And this was like March or February of a certain year. So I go back and I look. It's the same year. May was the sticker. This guy's registration was current through May. We're in, it was February or March. And I remember saying that, I go, your registration's not expired. He goes, yeah, well, he told me the computer saw it as expired. And that gave the deputy reasonable cause to search his car. Well, that was an unconstitutional Fourth Amendment violation, in my humble opinion. To stop a guy May, and then here it is February or March, and you go, well, your registration shows expired on the computer. And then found out, well, it was a mistake. And I think if I recall, he told me that. He said, the deputy said, well, sometimes the computer can make errors. Then why did you search his car? Because he was fishing. But those are examples of how these cops will violate your Fourth Amendment rights and go, Tell it to the judge. Because you don't need to follow the U.S. Constitution. You know, when they stand there and go, I will defend the Constitution of the state of whatever, and, you know, they're lying through their asshole. They're not going to defend anything. They're going to go out there and be, you know, just be thugs and just pull anybody over and do anything they want and go, I got a badge, man. What are you going to do, sue me? So I hope these cops get fired. I hope this Forrest gets $1 million for civil rights violation. I hope he gets $1 million for civil rights violations. Colorado needs to pay. And any of you cop watching, look out, because our cameras are coming for you. And by the way, Deputy Arden, that's not a threat. That's a statement of fact, buddy. Our cameras are coming for you. Because he tried to say, when I said, I'm going to show you the power of social media, well, it's a threat. No, it's not a threat. It's a statement of fact. We're going to show you the power of social media. If you're in Denver and you see a cop, you better record him because he's probably a liar. I want to hear what you guys got to say.